everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Full house. I love to see it. Thank you for joining us on the occasion of New York City's Design Week. I'm sure many of you have been out and about. The city is so full of design events and discourse, and it's all so exciting, and we're so happy to take part tonight. My name is Alexandra Hudkowski. I am the curator of public programs here at the museum, and I actually have the honor of leading the National Design Awards, a Cooper Hewitt initiative launched in 2000. The awards and the associated public programs seek to increase national awareness of the impact of design in our everyday lives. Reflecting the ever-growing scope of design each year, an esteemed jury selects a winner for 10 different categories. Tonight, we will be hearing from Little Wing Lee, the 2025 National Design Award winner for interior design. Yeah. There's a lot of fans for Juanita and Little Wing here tonight, so nice. Little Wing Lee is an interior designer known for her sharp eye for color, texture, materiality, along with her thoughtful and narrative-driven approach to design. In 2019, she started Studio and Projects, whose work spans cultural institutions, commercial environments, public and private hospitality spaces, intimate residences, and even products. Driven by human experience, compelling narratives, and the profound power of beauty, Studio and Projects explores design as a holistic exercise by drawing upon the expertise of a diverse range of collaborators, one of which we have here with us tonight. She also founded Black Folks in Design, a not-for-profit organization whose mission is to bring awareness to and promote the cultural contributions, excellence, and importance of Black designers. Joining the conversation with Little Wing Lee is Juanita Wichienkuer, a longtime collaborator and award-winning design leader with deep expertise in museum and hospitality environments. With a career spanning leading firms such as Ralph Applebaum Associates, where she was the lead exhibit designer for the history galleries at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, a fellow Smithsonian unit, and Atelier Ace Hotel, where she served as director of architecture and interiors. Juanita brings a very interesting approach to storytelling through space. Most recently, she led exhibit design at Smithsonian Exhibits, and now serves as Associate Creative Director at GNA. So Little Wing and Juanita will be sharing more about the interrelated work between interior designers and architects. When I first met Little Wing, we sat down for coffee, and she started telling me about a new project, but we really were fascinated about the micro and the macro. So many decisions being made on such different levels, whether it's the color or the texture or the facade or the structure. They will share about many of their different projects, including a new project called Ray Harlem, a new building designed by architect Frida Escobedo in partnership with Handel Architects right here in New York City. The residential portion of the building has just opened its doors, and the building will also house the National Black Theater, due to open in 2 years. Before I pass it off to them, however, I would like to mention, I'm going to do a little plug for the National Design Awards because we're in the middle of nominations, and I wanted to let you all know that they're open to all. Anyone can nominate, and you can nominate across the United States, and we encourage all of you to consider it before the deadline of June 2nd, 2025. You just go to our website, it takes a couple of minutes, and then the winners join us for important public programs throughout the year in educational initiatives like this. That's it from me. Thank you so much. Let's kick this off.
Hello. Okay, we were told to hold these like rock stars and not
an ice
game
cream
show
cone.
hosts. Okay. All right. I'm Little Wing. That's Juanita. Did you want to talk about this slide?
I did. I wanted to give a shout out. Sorry if we might keep doing this because, like we're saying, we're longtime collaborators, but there's also a number of our collaborators in the audience. I'm going to give a shout out to Lauren because this is an image of the two of us at ACE's headquarters, but we're specifically here in this image talking about our collaboration with RBW, Rich, Brilliant, Willing, which was a product collaboration for light, which was one of my favorite collabs. And I want to give a shout out to Lauren too, who was also part of this collaboration.
All right, so we're just going to give a little background about ourselves. So one of the first questions people often ask me is, where did my name come from? So my parents named me after a Jimi Hendrix song, and it came from this album, Axis Bold as Love. Whenever I start a project, I often start by looking at art. So paintings, sculptures, just thinking about the quality of light of the space, and also color. I do love colors and textures. I love anything iridescent, often looking to nature for inspiration, anything fluorescent and metallic. And also history and anything vintage is also really important to me. My undergrad is in religion and African American studies, and I think that importance of culture in history is also often something that's very important to me. That drawing there is a drawing that my grandparents had done of their house in the 40s in Connecticut. I'm not quite sure why they had their house drawn, but it's really beautiful, I think. And I love gardening. My first entree into design was through landscape architecture. It's kind of what I thought I would be doing, but nature is important to my designs, and always that layer of plants in the interiors as well. And then we're talking about materials. So thinking about the color, the texture, materials that have a handmade quality are things that I'm often drawn to. And also the power of place. I was born in Boston and grew up in Hawaii and New Jersey, and have lived in Brooklyn for 30 years. So these places really have an influence on my aesthetic, and also thinking about places that I've traveled, whether it's Japan or Morocco, Copenhagen. Architecture, of course, so thinking about the form of the exterior of the building, but also the spaces that are crafted in the interiors. And then finally, fashion, style, which I also really love. Again, you see the use of colors and gold.
Thank you. So my background is as an architect. My formal training is as an architect, but I've also worked as a construction project manager. This is the excavation phase of a job site in downtown Manhattan. But where the way I think of myself, and I was excited next door, in case you guys didn't know, there's people making models next door. I think of myself as a model maker. So I've always been interested in how things come together, and also in exploring different materials. This is mixed media. This is some resin pours, and some kind of reusing existing things. Like this is sun studies at the middle, made out of stationary clips. And this kind of model making design sensibility, it's not just where I'm from. I'd say it still informs my design, my design work today on all scales. I've done some traditional architecture. This is when I was working as a project architect. But when it comes to what really inspires me, I'd say travel, likewise, is a huge source of inspiration for me. We have a lot of overlapping interests. I think that's what makes it so fun to work together. So color, texture, materiality, plants, food, also the ways that people, like processes, the ways that people are making things. Like this is some, on the bottom left is some leather that's curing in the sun in Morocco. And beyond that, this is from a work trip to Uganda, thinking about people's relationship with their environment, how they're using materials from the environment to make shelter for themselves, and getting into construction techniques and how culture informs building.
So our first collaboration was working on the National Museum of African American History and Culture. We started working together in 2012, I think. So we've been friends and collaborators since then. So this is obviously the building. But for the exhibitions, the Smithsonian wanted this museum to look and feel very different than other Smithsonians. And so the exhibition design team was made up of people who had exhibition design experience, but also people who had never worked on museums before. So thinking about architects who are coming from, I guess, more graphic or retail installation, myself as an interior designer, thinking about graphic designers, interactive designers. So I think our approach to museum making was a bit different. And so I think that collaboration just created a really beautiful and important building.
So our focus was the history galleries. For those of you who have been to the museum, they're the subterranean galleries. We went down 3 levels. What you're seeing at the top is the concourse level, and then the galleries are laid out. It's as eras of history. So each level represents an era, but it was really important to us that they all shared a space.
Oh, so when we started on this project, the history gallery was on one floor of the museum. And as we started the design, we laid out the large artifacts, so the segregated rail car, the House of Enslaved Africans, the Tuskegee airplane. And once we started to dig deeper into the content, we quickly realized that there wasn't enough space to tell the story. So we proposed this idea of digging down to the curators and to the museum, which they were all excited about, and then presented it to the architecture team. And they changed their design and integrated these kind of steps down to tell the full story of history. This is an example of the collaboration between the three-dimensional designers and graphics. We're working on the interior elevations, sending them to the graphic designers. The graphic designer is working with the curator to understand the story. This is an example of how visitors get from the main level down into history. And we really wanted the visitors to have similar experiences, whether they decided to take the stair or the elevator. So kind of that back and forth of three-dimensional designers, graphic designers, content, and sharing these drawings back and forth to create this space.
This shows how we used it. It's quite long, I'd say. It's quite massive, the scale of the undertaking to try to consider the story of African American history. It's hundreds of years, if not more. So we thought of this as, we talked about it as the journey. And in order to punctuate the journey, we used the large-scale artifacts as kind of anchor points, both visually and experientially. And this is just showing how we thought through it in model form for this Tuskegee training plane, placing the plane in the model and trying to imagine what it would look like in real life, and then the built reality to the right. And this is how it ended up in the cavernous space of the history galleries. So this is showing the ramps that take you from era to era, so from gallery to gallery. And this also shows some of the materiality for the space. We made a point of choosing finishes that are traditionally outdoor finishes for the look and feel of it, and also considering the acoustics of the space. Like the wall on the left spans all of the history galleries, so it's like a 50-foot tall wall that we call the Founding of America wall, and we used acoustic plaster on it to dampen the sound.
So this is the material palette that we created for the history galleries. We wanted to have a very restrained palette, and we also wanted to choose materials that had a patina that showed kind of the age and the history. We chose brass as the metal. I thought of it as a very American material, but could also kind of change through time. So we had a more polished brass, and then it kind of gets darkened as you're moving through time. And another layer to the materials palette were the scenics. And so thinking about developing materials that were the red clay of Georgia or the sandy soil of South Carolina. So thinking about how these places were influencing the materials palette.
So like the historical context of the materials. We also really felt strongly, we wanted everything to feel authentic. We really made an effort to avoid paints or coatings when we could, and to just have the actual materials be in their most kind of raw form.
And then these are just some examples of the actual artifacts. Obviously, we're telling the story, and the artifacts are extremely important. So this is Rosa Parks' dress. Thinking about more installation pieces, so Paradox of Liberty, there in the center, and then even down to this tiny pocket watch of Bayard Rustin. It was a gift from MLK Jr. So how do we kind of display these iconic artifacts like Rosa Parks' dress, and then maybe these objects which are less known but as equally important?
So our consideration was from the very large scale, that is like a wall that's over 100 foot long by 50 feet tall, down to things that are just like jewelry scale, super personal. Sure, this shows what in my mind is the culmination of the history galleries, even though it's outside of the galleries themselves. This shows the contemplation court. The design architect for the project was David Adje, but the placement of the contemplation court is such that, so you go through each era of history, and at the end of each gallery, we had a space for reflections, and that's what you're seeing at the right. So a space to sit and reflect and see, panels. In this case, it was luminaries of the time. And there's a story booth where you could share your own story. And then coming out of the history galleries, it's both heavy and uplifting material, but it's quite a lot. And so the contemplation court is a place where people could kind of take a beat and reflect on everything you've seen. Just to underscore the way that we were thinking of all of this is really about the experience of the visitor.
Yeah, we talked a lot kind of about the emotional temperature as people moved through these spaces, and kind of mapped the content and how heavy or light it was, so that people are always kind of going up and down and up and down. So I think was an important layer to the design of this gallery. So after our time at the for NMAC, we went to Ace Hotel. We first started working on Sister City, which was a new brand from Ace, and then started working on Ace Toronto. Shim Sutcliffe was the architecture firm for this new building. They're a Toronto-based architecture firm. And the team at Ace worked on the interiors for the guest rooms as well as the public spaces.
I would add to this, a lot of people, at least for me, thought it was really funny to go from museum design into hospitality or into hotels. But to my mind, it's still the same kind of design approach. I think we share that, in that it's narrative-based design, or there's a storyline or a history or a consideration of culture. I'd say, to it that's unique. Like, it's not just going for a specific color or look. It's really like a design that's coming out of the culture of the place.
So here we're looking at an image of the space in construction, and then this is the finished main lobby. This is a very monumental space. The lounge is almost floating. We called it a tray, floating in space. But it's interesting, once people were visiting the space, they kept asking, well, what was here before? What was this building used for? We're like, this is all new construction. So I think the weight of the architecture and I think the texture of the materials kind of lead people to think that it was existing. And then there are a lot of layers within the architecture, within the interior design that lead to this very kind of strong, heavy, and beautiful space.
I thought this too. I thought this image was a good example of showing that kind of the relationship between architecture and interiors, because I think people often think that the architects make the shell, like make the space, and then interior designers come in and fill it. But I think in this case, it's not that black and white, because in the image on the right, the artwork, it's stained plywood, and it's really, I would 100% credit Howard of Shim Sutcliffe with the artwork. They even did the lights over the bar.
So then this image, again, just speaking to that collaborative nature of the project, the architect Shim Sutcliffe designed the light fixtures. This is the check-in desk when you're arriving to the hotel. But just having the layers of stories, I think, is important, especially at ACE. So looking at the architecture, thinking about the function of the check-in desk. I sourced all the vintage items in Canada, so just thinking about how that back shelf is styled, and then also kind of that layer of graphics as well. And then this is looking at further details. So that is the directory for the hotel. We wanted it to be sculptural. And so working closely with the graphic design team and the fabricator to make it feel that it was stone or something heavy. And then this is a DJ booth, which is an important part of the ACE culture, but wanting something that's movable, that's functional, but also interesting, and really work closely with Canadian designers and artists for kind of the art program and all of these details within the hotel. This is just showing this building was new construction, and so we really wanted to source as much vintage furniture as possible, just to bring kind of that warmth and depth. But in the project, we're also designing custom furniture pieces. So this is a double-sided sofa that's in the lounge, but wanting to be sure that everything is kind of working together. So this is almost like a process page in how we work.
And here is even more more process of the real deal behind the scenes of the shot on the left is the restaurant in the lower level, at the lower level of the hotel, and then on the right is the two of us with the architect and developer testing out the banquettes, that I think just speaks to the extensive and iterative process of making mock-ups, sitting on mock-ups, measuring things. It's not just looking at material swatches, but really like physically building them and sitting on them and coming to agreement about exactly how deep the seat should be. Not a straightforward process.
And then this is looking at the tables that we were just looking in the previous slide. custom designed cocktail tables and dining tables. So kind of looking at our initial design drawing and then working with a fabricator here in Brooklyn at the Navy Yard. And then these chairs sent to Toronto to be used in the restaurant and the rooftop bar. This is one of the conference rooms at the hotel, but that layer of art is extremely important. And so Juanita and I worked together to develop the art program for the public spaces as well as the guest rooms. This is conference table, which was also custom, and you're kind of looking out into this exterior space, so we thought it would be great to have these kind of sculptures that lived outside. Here we're looking at one of the suites of the guest rooms. Again, the layer of vintage furniture, and then kind of the custom pieces that we designed in-house, the bed, the window seat, all these pieces coming together in this beautiful room. More process and our furniture selection.
But always plants.
Always plants.
It always makes it better. It makes it more livable. This is kind of work in process for the roof bar. The sketch is by Shim Sutcliffe. But I think this shows kind of what we do in terms of looking at material samples and then envisioning how that's going to come together in the space, pulling precedent images, and also the beginnings of thinking through who could be collaborators, like local collaborators, for large-scale and small-scale details. So on the lower left, this is concrete work by David Yumamoto.
And so we contacted him to do custom wall panels in the bar. He had never done kind of a wall installation, but he was really excited to work together. So this is some of the photographs from his studio as he started to develop that special wall installation. And then here you see his work flanking either side of the fireplace. This is looking at the roof bar. Again, you see a lot of vintage furniture. Toronto is a very gray city, and so wanting to have a lot of plants, but also I made a very conscious effort not to specify anything black in this space. You'll see a lot of dark greens, dark browns, but really wanted it to feel warm and welcoming. And now we're going to move on to Ray in Harlem. So this project, there are many collaborators. So Frida Escobedo is the design architect for the building, and Handel Architects is the AOR for the residential component. And the National Black Theater is also a partner with Ray, and their firm AOR is Marvel. So Ray is scheduled to open in a few weeks, I think. And National Black Theater will open 2 years from now. Studio and Projects, we were the interior designer for both clients, so working on the more public-facing spaces for Ray, and then collaborating with Frida on the amenity spaces, and then with National Black Theater also working on the more public-facing spaces for the theater. I've been a huge fan of Frida's work, and in starting that collaboration, looking at her kind of concept designs for the building, the importance of the brick and the color of the brick was a long conversation to kind of get this pink color, which was referencing the Ocean Grove in Nigeria that was very important to National Black Theater. So once she kind of had her exterior materials palette, I got to work and started to think about colors that would complement that brick and also contrast it in a way, and also thinking about the location in Harlem. So referencing what we all know as Harlem Renaissance, but thinking about Harlem's past, its present, and its future. And so this was kind of the color palette that we developed for the project. Here is the main front desk, the lobby. Designed a custom terrazzo floor, so the pattern changes as you're moving throughout that space. And then above the front desk is a metallic kind of bronze ceiling detail. Again, my love of metallic came through. And on this project, Juanita was a collaborator. We could talk about the interior architecture, materials. It was just great to have someone to kind of bounce ideas off of, and her beautiful hand sketches. So this was a design that we were kind of thinking through, and the image on the right is a photograph of the actual mailroom as it was built. And then this is the living room. This is the first space that you walk into on your way to the apartments. So again, this mix of vintage furniture and custom designed pieces. Again, you see that metal ceiling again.
And always plants.
More plants.
Always necessary.
And this is another view of the living room looking out towards Fifth Avenue. And the last design piece is a custom stained glass window that we'll be finalizing later this week. And then the next slide is showing some progress photos. You can kind of see the terrazzo tile there. This green framed view going back to the front desk. There's a custom banquette that we worked on, but I really love these in-process photos. And then this is a space that Frida and I collaborated with. She picked up kind of the material language of the terrazzo and the color palette, and really creating a space that works for the residents, but also gives flexibility to different programming that's going to be happening in the building. Here is a rendering of the library. So thinking about white oak, to think about how people would work in that space. We designed a custom library table. And then the next image. This is also in construction, but I think we got pretty close to the design intent. So excited to see people using this space in a few weeks. And then, this is just exterior of the building and some more details as we get closer to opening. And here we are. I'm working on a drawing for stained glass that was for Sister City, but still collaborating with that stained glass artist for Ray. And here's Juanita always taking measurements of something.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think we're trying to determine the height for there's supposed to be hanging pendants.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out how high or how low they should hang.
Yeah. And the center is a photograph of us at the opening of NAMAC. I remember speaking to this visitor, and she was in tears. She had us in tears, just really thanking us for taking so much time and creating such a beautiful museum. She said, most people don't know American history, and they certainly don't know Black American history. And so just to create this beautiful space that told her story was really moving and important to her. So we felt that all of our conversations about the color brown that we should use, the brass, really made an impact. So that's us. Now you can ask us questions and we'll go back. I know that was a lot to look at.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna open up to the audience. You can see the micro and macro that they got into in all of these projects, but I know we have a lot of designers here and non-designers. Feel free to ask anything at all.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for your presentation. The question I have is, in all of your projects, do you have any challenges as far as like production and costing? And how do you navigate those challenges as far as like having to change material specs or change your wish list of production, like whatever, yeah.
I think that's
All of them.
every project. I've never worked on.
100%.
I know. I was like, I've never. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it brings up some challenges, but if I think back to the Smithsonian, NMAC, we were looking at this materials palette and these beautiful bronze samples, which we could not afford. So
I'm sure that's a shock for everyone that we weren't able to afford the hand burnished brass
Yeah.
everywhere.
So we did make concessions. So kind of that panel that we were looking at it in that last image is actually brass. So just thinking about where people would be close and touching and where they would be kind of far away. So those large letters in the 50-foot wall, it's actually plastic letters that are spray painted bronze. No one is going to be that close to those letters, so you kind of pick and choose where to spend the money. But I think that's every project. You never have the budget that you want.
Every single project, yeah. And we actually landed on a powder coat. I'm gonna look at some of my colleagues who I'm working with right now because it feels like a never-ending search for a good powder coat that has like a kind of organic look and feel to it. But I feel like we did for this project. We picked a powder coat that had just a little bit of translucence so that it looked organic and not as flat as just like doing a straight like RAL color or something like that. But yes, to always having to evolve the design selections along the way. But still, process-wise, I feel like we both still always do the putting your intention out there and then just trying to stay true to it, even if you have to respec again and again.
But I think also working for ACE, just really thinking about the operations of a space, and so you can kind of push back with the client. When you're running a bar or a restaurant, like you don't want to replace chairs and tables often. And so you can say, yes, this chair is $900, but it's going to last the entire life of the project. And so in the end, you're actually saving money. And I think to have the conversations with our F&B team and say, that chair is going to make $1,500 a night in drinks, so you want it to be comfortable, you want it to be durable. And so now having that information, you can kind of push back a little with clients, a little.
Hi, amazing work. I love to also design with vintage and find it so hard to plan ahead in finding the vintage. And when you see it, how do you store it? How do you procure it? Not putting all your eggs in the basket that you're gonna find the perfect vintage piece. At what point in your process do you start hunting? And once you find that piece, do you have secrets of kind of how you store, how you design around it and handle kind of the installation process? Because it's just the one thing that you don't want to bank on it, but if you find something, then do you have a space that you store your vintage in? How do you navigate that?
Well, I think just starting with a strong concept. So for ACE, we really had a strong idea of the pieces that we wanted, or the ideal pieces, but then just being flexible. So knowing we're never going to find 50 of the same chair for the dining room, and so knowing that 6 will match, these other 8 will match. And so having that flexibility is important. For this project, it was so large, so we did have a storage space. I think for smaller residential, it's a issue, but I think being flexible, but holding on to your vision for what you're looking for.
Do you ever get decision fatigue? It sounds like you guys have to make decisions all day long.
All the time.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, period.
Yes. And then, as I joke around, then you have to go to Mexico to reset.
But I think it's important. I mean, I think Juanita and I, why I like working with her is that we can laugh about so many things. So it's helpful to have someone that you can laugh with and be like, this is
That's
so
true.
insane.
Or just to bounce ideas off of. That's one of the things I love about working together. Because you often get decision-making fatigue, or you're just staring at something for so many, this brown or that brown or that brown, yeah. And so having someone else look at it with fresh eyes, or laughing, like we're laughing earlier today that Little Wayne was saying, and you're correct, I always choose green.
She does.
Yeah, every time.
How did you guys take care of your plants? That your life seems so busy, but
Oh, had to learn. Very, very difficult. I had a black thumb for like 10 years. I had to like really work on it to not kill so many
because
plants.
I can imagine you guys' life is so busy because so many things happening, and every designer know when we work on things, we don't even feed ourselves. And then
Yeah.
the space is not like a beautiful place we try to design for others. So I often, how did you balance these? Like you take care of the plants and then
I don't know about you. I got those little plastic globe things.
plastic
that was-
globe?
It's like the self-watering globes.
Oh,
Yes, high recommendation.
and how did you guys know each other? Did you meet each other at work?
We met at work.
We met at work.
RAA?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. In the kitchen. don't
Oh,
know.
I forgot
At
that.
RA.
The 29th floor.
Really?
The 29th floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I actually used to work there and then got to know you two, but I never meet you guys. I'm just very excited to hear you guys' story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy. I'm glad to meet you in real life. Yeah.
I'm going to go to you, and then there's one back there.
The work is so impressive. Thank you. I'm asking, because I'm an artist, how you put together all of the decisions that you've made and how the art is so well integrated and seems like it's not just something on the wall. And how you choose your artists and how, I think you had called it an art stable or an art
Program.
like program.
Art program.
Yeah, I'm curious about this.
So the art program for Toronto here, so we developed 2 art programs, one for the guest rooms and one for the public spaces. As Juanita said, ACE, each hotel is of the city and of the country. So we wanted to work with Toronto-based artists, Canadian artists, and because it is such an international city, really thinking about showing the diversity of artists and aesthetics. So that was kind of our starting point. And then for the guest rooms, it was kind of stories about home is what we kind of put out to artists. And it's a very limited budget, very limited. But artists were just excited to be a part of the project. And it's rare to have real art in guest rooms. And kind of that same approach for the public spaces. So thinking about the locations of these pieces, and then just looking through artists' portfolios and thinking, oh, this would be really great to have this brush textured sculpture on the wall in the lounge.
I would add to just considering the art placement early, so not like waiting to the end and then saying, oh man, now we have to like put a couple things in frames on the wall. Instead, like getting in really early and having it be integrated it really in the like the design, initial design concepts for a space, like for the art to inform the design if possible, like in doing research, in doing deep research about a place. So I just addressing it early in the process and considering it integral instead of last minute.
Go for your research.
Just to go to the real place and like to spend time and to eat and to hang out. Yeah. To me, I feel like that's the only way to do it. Because
You have
online
to
can
ask
only
a
get
lot
you
of
so far.
questions. You talk to your friends here in New York, and then they introduce you to their friends somewhere, and then it's like anything, yeah.
Kind of piggybacking on the research question, when you're approached with a project like the museum, for example, that has so much, it's so expansive, but also can be such a personal project for the people that visit the space, how do you start? How do you start when you're approached to design a space that can do both things, especially when there's so much history literally involved, but also it's such an expansive timeline and it's in one location, but really needs to encompass so much about the people from multiple facets, in this case of the US, but really of anywhere, depending on what the outcome is at the end.
For NMAC, we started with the curator's outlines. So each gallery has its own curator, and they've written their story. And so you're reading the story, and then you're understanding kind of the larger idea that they're trying to tell. So I think specifically of the segregation gallery, working with Spencer, and reading his outline, it was so clear that there was like progress and then the pushback, progress, pushback. And so when we were designing the space, kind of thinking about that architecturally, so how do you show progress and pushback? So thinking about how walls would articulate. So I think it's, for that project in particular, was really looking to the curator and how they wanted to tell that story. We're the designers, and they're kind of giving us the guide in how to tell the story.
Yeah, yes. I'd say yes to that. And I would add letting people listening and letting people lead with what they're expert in and leading with what we're expert in. So I think of it as curators, like the curators that we work with, they usually have a PhD and maybe a couple books, and they're the leading expert, often the leading expert in their field. So to me, it's listening to what they have to say, but also coming forward with, you're the leading expert in that subject matter, but we understand space and color and texture and how design could evoke an emotional response, like beyond the kind of more, I feel bad saying this, but the more cut and dry, like more how we can elicit an emotional response through design and have it not just be a straightforward representation of history. Because I think that the more straightforward approach, like you're gonna lose people. Like people are gonna glaze over if it's just like a wall of text. And so I've tried to explain it to curators that way in a polite way. Just like, that's wonderful that you wrote a book, but this is not a book. Like this is a spatial experience that people are gonna walk through, and hopefully that it will resonate with them. So I would say drawing from personal experience too, just a very straightforward, like, how would I feel? And I talk about this a lot with my team now. I'm like, I would feel tired. I would need a place to sit down. That to me why is the contemplation core is necessary.
So both of you have, from what I think I understand, like you have an architectural background in school, and you have more of an interiors background in school. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between those spatial understandings, and maybe how you two bring that to the table?
I think as an interior designer, we're taught to think at the human scale, so how people are sitting at a restaurant, relaxing at home, and then thinking about the physical materials, like is it wood, is it paint? I went to Pratt, but they really are teaching interior architecture, so we were taught to think about the architecture of the space as well as the furniture. And I think why I love working with Juanita is that she's an architect who can think about interiors, and I think I'm an interior designer that can think about architecture. But I'm not trying to be an architect. I don't want to be an architect, and she doesn't want to be. Or do you want to be an interior designer? But I think she
No,
doesn't.
you know what it is? It's that I recognize, it's what I was just saying. I recognize people's respective expertise. So I recognize that you're an expert
Right.
in interiors. I am really not. Yeah, but I like thinking about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, Juanita's like gray.
Yeah,
Gray?
or green.
Or green.
Those are the
Green.
two choices. But I would say too, we have a lot of overlapping, not just interests, but I'd say when it comes to ideas, we both have a lot of ideas and do like kind of concept work. But then when we work together, we do often split the work in some ways. Like when it comes to picking colors, I'm like, I guess it's green, but Little Wing will pick the actual green, like the actual, like what's the actual color. And I tend to do some of the more technical, like working with the acoustic consultant about the like sound transmission from one space to another, that kind of like technical part.
I think we have time for a couple more. So I'm going to go here, and then you're next.
Hi. I have a question, which is that, so I'm not a designer or architect or anything related to that, but I'm really interested as a non-expert and amateur. So I was wondering if you could give some recommendations of like books or magazines or something, like if I wanted to just like learn more and be more informed about it, what should I do?
Hang out upstairs at the Cooper Hewitt.
Thank you.
That's a good start.
That's a good
Yeah,
question. I guess just start visiting spaces that you like, that you enjoy being in, and just taking time to think about what it is about the space that you're enjoying. I think you'll start to see a pattern for yourself of, I really love spaces that are by the ocean or have low seating. I don't know. And then I think travel is really important. And taking lots of photos. I'm trying to think a book or.
I know, same. I'm trying to think of books and magazines, or I guess now everything's online. I'm
Well,
like, wow,
I do love World of Interiors. That's one of my favorite magazines.
Oh.
That's so great. In Praise of Shadows is one of my favorite design books.
Will you tell us what that book is?
It's a short book, but I guess it's talking. I mean, the author is Japanese, but just talking about the way the different products are designed, specifically from a specific culture. So, if the pen had been developed in Japan, it would have started from a calligraphy paint, and like we wouldn't have ballpoint pens. Or thinking about dentist offices, we think of them as being white and shiny and bright, but in Japan, dentist offices were made of wood. So just thinking about the cultural context in which things are designed.
I'm trying to think what I would recommend. My personal obsession is the Venice Biennale. It alternates years, art and architecture, and it's a good kind of like smorgasbord. It's almost like the design Olympics, or like art. It's like because people from countries all over the world contribute, so it's always interesting to me. It varies year by year, and then alternating art and architecture. Design books, I'm sort of at a loss. The last book I bought was on Saturday, and it was Olafur Eliasson. Yeah.
But just to say that Ray is in the Venice Biennale this year.
Oh,
So,
are they?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it's exciting. I just saw the photo of the display, so we'll have to get into
Cool.
that. Yeah, very cool.
Gonna have to go to Venice.
We'll have to go to Venice, yeah.
Juanita, you were in the Venice Biennale once too, right? I saw that
was,
in your bio.
Yeah, I was in the year David Chipperfield curated it, and the theme was Common Ground. And I'd say it actually has a lot of overlapping themes with like our talk today, because I think he's a master personally, but he chose the theme Common Ground in tribute to the fact that no one in what we do, it's not, you're really never a solo operation. It's really, you're always like collaborating with other people. And so he invited all his collaborators and named, and that's hence the theme, Common Ground.
You had a question?
I am also not a professional in the design space by any means, but when you mentioned the durability of selecting the furniture for hospitality spaces, you're putting so much of your heart and soul into these designs. Is it hard to let go of them and have no control over how these spaces are used or how they're cared for once the project is completed?
I say I like seeing how things evolve, even though it can be, irritating at times. But I think as a designer, I feel like I learned so much, and now I rant a lot about vacuum cleaners hitting the wall 10 million times, because that's just the reality that's going to happen. And now I know you have to have a baseboard. You have to, and it has to be higher than the vacuum cleaner. So I like it, even though it's kind of painful sometimes seeing the thing you designed fall apart. But now you know to never do that again.
Yeah, for me, I think the opening night of a space is always the most exciting, just to see people come in and have a drink and relax or walk through the exhibitions, and just to hear their responses, or reactions, and questions. So I think we both do this work for people to use the space, and so that is kind of the final layer of activation. It's people living in their new apartments or going to see a show at National Black Theater. And it does sound a little cheesy, but just I love doing public spaces because these are the spaces where life is happening. You're going to have your friend's birthday party. You're going to, I don't know, have a wonderful experience at a show. And those spaces were designed by us, interior designers, architects, so.
We also literally pour ketchup on stuff to test it out and leave a lemon on it overnight. No, but really, it's part of the design process.
We scratch the tabletop with a fork.
Yeah.
So I think, part of the collaboration is working with the head of housekeeping for a hotel, or to think about the F&B director and, them telling us, don't specify this material because people are going to step on it. So I think we're learning a lot from these other experts, which is also why I enjoy this job.
Painful and fun, basically.
We're going to do one more, and I'm open to one more too. I love all these questions. We have a little bit of time, so yeah.
I was just saying to my friend, I was like, I wonder how they design their personal spaces. So I'm curious how you guys approach that, and also I'm especially curious how static it is. Like if you allow yourself to. I recently moved from California to New York, and I'm finding what I'm gravitating towards from a design perspective is different. So how I'm curating my space too, because I spend so much more time indoors here. I also have so many plants because that's the only way I survived winter. So I'm curious how you guys think about your spaces and how you move through like different seasons of curation, or if there's some pieces you bring back, just to talk on that a bit.
I can see some people who've been to my apartment laughing right now. I have a lot of plants and books and things. I'm a little bit of a hoarder. Yeah, so yes, I collect a lot of things in my travels and then haul them back here. Yeah.
The same. I have a lot of books. I have lots of cast glass. I could see my husband back there laughing. Fabrics. I think it's, as Juanita said, you're constantly collecting. So yeah, I would say my apartment is a mix of pieces that I love or pieces of friends who have designed. But I think being in this industry, you know, you see an amazing sofa, but it's $30,000. It's like, I can't afford that. So you're making compromises. I love my apartment, but I think, you know, people think we're designers and we have this Architectural Digest ready space, which I think our spaces could be an Architectural Digest, but we're just
Maybe yours, Little Wing.
But I think it's creating spaces that are comfortable and usable for our lives. So, yeah.
Easy to collect, having a harder time curating and getting rid of a few things.
Hi. So like many, I'm very new to this. I'm entering into this world, claiming it. But I want to know how important was formal education versus just experience? And as someone who's already established in her career, if you think that a formal, like, hard pivot to just focusing on education is really going to be the thing that's needed to grow and have, like, longevity.
So I did not start in design. So my career, I think I said this. So my majors were religion and African American studies, and I minored in film. And so I worked in documentary film and television for 10 years before switching to interior design. So for me, going back to school, getting my master's at Pratt was important, just because it was a new language, a new way of thinking, a new way to express myself. So I'm plugging Pratt because it was an amazing experience. And I think it really prepared me to be a working designer. But you're not learning everything in school. I think, you know, that first job that you have after graduation, you're just thinking like, oh my gosh, they never told us about this, or that. You never, you know, I didn't expect to be working in Excel so much. So I do think formal education is important, but your experience after that is also going to inform your work.
I would second that education's important, but I'd say experience is arguably more important. But education probably, it helps you get your foot in the door more than, I'd say, more than the foundational skills. I do think it is important, the foundational skills you get through education, but like you're saying, for me personally, I learned arguably a lot more, like just on the job.
One more question. How do you guys find the opportunity to express all your creativity? It's already hard for one person to find the opportunity to design, and you two work so many times together. I'm even curious about what's the next.
Me
So
too.
I'm just going to repeat it in the mic just in case anyone didn't hear, but how do you find opportunity and opportunity to work together, I think is the sum of it. Okay.
I always say that it's about your community, kind of the people that you know. All of my projects have come through relationships that I've had with other people. So whether it was a professor from Pratt, that was my first job out of school, was working for a professor. Then it's a friend's friend knew someone at REA, and so that's how I got that introduction. Then we met Juanita. Then it's all through connections, whether they're a close friend or someone you meet at a party. So I always tell people to build a really strong community. So.
Yes, I would agree. I think so much opportunity, if not all of it, maybe all of it, yeah, comes through personal connections, and also I think by kind of I don't want to sound a little crazy, but really going there and like whatever you do, instead of just like, oh, I'm kind of like, sure, I guess, just like really going hard on things. Yeah, showing up and like being being obsessed, like really going all the way, I would say. And then sometimes people will approach you for what you bring. And so for that reason, I think that's why maybe I'm a little weird about like magazines and stuff, because I think some people look to design magazines and kind of replicate things. And I think I would encourage people to instead run with things that you're personally interested in a kind of organic way. It shows. I think it really comes through, like just kind of authenticity of your interests. Right. And then it doesn't. I say the word like obsession or extreme. It doesn't feel that way when you're just genuinely into it. And then I think opportunity sometimes comes out of that, because someone might have seen something you did that was very specific and then be interested in working with you. And then for the working with each other part, I feel like we've worked together a lot because we like working together. And so it's gone both ways, like you might get an opportunity and pull me in, or I might get an opportunity and pull you in. But that comes from, I think, just us enjoying collaborating with each other.
And I think it's also trust. Like, I trust Juanita's tastes, or if I couldn't be at a meeting, I trust that she's going to do what I would do or would want, or she
Make
understands.
It gold.
Yeah, she
had some plans.
She would know what I would do in a space. But I think it's also, as Juanita said, that we have similar interests, that we interested in travel. We can talk politics. We're talking about food. And so I think you see that in the types of work that we do, that we're not just doing one type of design. So we could do a museum. We could do a hotel. We could, yeah.
Maybe that's it. We're both very flexible, like with each other and in the things that we do. We haven't been very prescriptive.
Or I think we're just curious. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, we ask a lot of questions.
It's critical.
Yes, that is true. It's true.
It's critical.
Yeah. Well, you have to have a sense of humor. I think, we're at ACE doing an install, and we're on the floor rolling, like getting the lint off the rugs for a photo shoot.
We
and
cleaned
we're
the floor with the lint roller.
We both have master's degrees, and we're cleaning the floor. So it's part of the job, and you're with someone that you can laugh with, and so it makes it easier.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I really do think having fun is critical, because when you have fun with the people you work with, that you want to do it again, as opposed to people when it gets kind of squinchy and you're like, well, now we're at an impasse because I want to make everything green, But when you enjoy working together, you want to do it again and again. And I'd say it's kind of infectious, because then when you work with other people, it spreads. It's more of it becomes more of a community, and you have repeat collaborators. It's not just a one-time thing.
Well, I think that's a really great place to end for now. We have some time to mingle, and you can ask more questions if you guys have time to hang out for a bit. But if we want to see your work in New York, besides Ray, what else can we go check out here in the city?
There is See No Evil Pizza, which is a restaurant in the downtown 1 station at 50th Street. So it's a very small pizzeria. It's kind of like 80s punk rock. And also I have some light fixtures for RBW. So I think they're having their opening night party tonight. So you could see my light fixtures there. And then we have some more projects in the pipeline. But yeah, Ray is opening soon.
Amazing. All of this is so inspiring, and I think the curiosity and showing up and being together is something that we really encourage here at the museum. You're all here with us today. We do many programs. We have like 2 or 3 a month. Some have to do with National Design Awards. Some have to do with our exhibitions. As you know, they're not open now, but please come back and see our triennial, which is on the topic of home, 25 site-specific installations. It's up through August. And we're doing a lot of fun things up until then. So join us. If you want to find out more, we have a newsletter, sign up. And again, I encourage you all to nominate for the National Design Awards. It's really to highlight all various different types of designers. So take a look at the website and make a selection. So thank you so, so much, Juanita and Little Wing.